It's all about the Torah, right? And what it is and where it came from. And all these words that you hear, today you're going to learn, well, actually it won't be today, but soon we're going to learn some very important words that you hear in just about every class, and you may not know what they mean, right? So the real point of this class is that you should understand where everything else that happens in your Jewish education is coming from, right? What is the Torah? Where did it come from? What's the written Torah? What's the oral Torah? What's the Mishnah? What's the Talmud? What's a Midrash? What do they mean when they say, it says in this tractate on page 28a, what's a tractate? And what do you mean 28a, right? All of those words. Last week we talked about the 5 books of the written Torah, and we talked about the 5 books are broken up into, what here? What are the 5 books broken up into? Every week we read one. Parsha, good. Right? The Parshat Shavua means the Parsha of the week. So every week we read one Parsha, which is a section of the Chumash, right, of the written Torah, right? And we talked about how every year we go through the whole thing. We talked about the books of the prophets, right, and the books of the writings, and then we take from the books of the prophets and create a Haftarah. That was all last week's class. Okay? Now, we started this class by drawing on the board the important moment, if we want to talk about the giving of the Torah, is what happened at Mount Sinai. So we've spoken about the written Torah. Now, turn in your packet to the last page. Okay, we're going to see some very interesting things that are in the written Torah. Okay, take a look. Let's start in the middle, where it says excerpt from Deuteronomy. Everybody see that? Somebody want to read this? This is even a part of a verse from Deuteronomy. You can read it in English. The verse, and you shall slaughter. Go ahead.
And you shall slaughter your cattle and your sheep, which God has given you in the way I have commanded you, and then you may eat them.
Good. What halacha, what Jewish law is this verse teaching us?
Kosher.
Good. What about kosher?
The way you slaughter animals.
Good, right? Kosher animals need to be slaughtered in a kosher way in order for the meat to be kosher. Right? When people ask you, what makes this kosher, what do people usually say?
The way you slaughter.
Good. Well, that's not what you people usually say, but you're right. Right?
People usually say it's been blessed.
It's been blessed by a rabbi.
That's it.
Right? I cannot, with the power vested in me, bless meat and turn it into kosher meat. Right? There's no such thing as being blessed by a rabbi. There is a blessing, a bracha, that one makes before slaughtering an animal in a kosher way. Right? But that's not what makes it kosher. What makes it kosher is that it was a kosher animal, and the animal was slaughtered in a certain way, and then it was salted and prepared in a certain way. Right? So the slaughtering in a certain way comes from this verse. Right? Now, all it says in this verse is that Hashem told Moshe, it says in the Torah, that you shall slaughter your animal in the way in which I have commanded you. Right? Where in the Chumash does it say what that way that Hashem commanded him was? It doesn't. Right? You can flip through the 5 books of the Torah, and it never ever tells you how to slaughter an animal.
Oh,
right?
does it?
It doesn't.
But does it tell you to slaughter in a way that does not cause them pain?
Nope. All it says is that you have to slaughter it in the way I have commanded you.
So it's in the oral Torah?
Well, 1 second.
Oh, it's the oral Torah.
Right? But in the written Torah, you can flip through the whole written Torah, all 5 books, every parsha, and you won't find anywhere where it says, what is this way that Hashem commanded us? Right? So where is it? In the oral Torah. What does that mean? Where's the oral Torah?
Well, it was given.
Huh?
It was given orally from God to Moshe and he came to the Nevi'im.
Okay, good. So what happened was that when Hashem gave, we talked about how Hashem gave the Torah word for word, letter for letter, right? When Hashem told the Torah to Moshe, he would say, Moshe, write this down. Right? And then he would say the words, when you slaughter your cattle and your sheep, in which God has given you, in the way in which I've commanded you, stop. Don't write this part down, but watch me. And then Hashem would explain to him how to slaughter an animal. And he said, you have to slaughter it with a knife, and you have to make sure the knife doesn't have any nicks, and you have to make sure that you cut this many of the valves that connect the trachea, and you have to do, right? There are all these laws of exactly how to slaughter, and what blessing to say before you slaughter, and what to do with the blood, and all of those things, right? So Hashem told all that to Moshe, and told him not to write it down. We'll talk about why he did it that way, right? But that's where the oral Torah comes from, right? The oral Torah was not written by rabbis. We will talk about the rabbi's role in oral Torah later, right? But it's not something that was invented later. It's not a series of legends The oral Torah's origin is that when Hashem gave the written Torah at Sinai, he gave along with it an oral Torah. And without the oral Torah, the written Torah makes no sense. Again, what was happening was Hashem was telling Moshe, write this down word for word, letter for letter. Stop, let me explain it to you. Write the next verse down, word for word, letter for letter. Stop, let me explain it to you. And Moshe didn't write that part down, he remembered it. Right? And then Moshe taught that to his students, which was an entire generation of people. We'll talk about what happened from then on. Right? But that's where the oral Torah comes from. Now with this, we answer a lot of questions. Right? Because there are a lot of things in the Torah, like I said, that make no sense if you don't have an oral Torah to go along with it. Right? For example, if you see below that, right? Where in the Torah, anybody ever been to a religious wedding? How do they get married? Under the chuppah. Good, right? Man gives a ring or something of value to the woman, right? She receives it. He says a sentence that indicates that he's giving this to her because he wants to marry her. 2 kosher witnesses see it. They're married, right? Where does it say that in the Torah? It doesn't, right? Now it does say Abraham married Sarah, and it does say that Yitzchak married. Anybody know who Isaac married? Rivka. And it says that Jacob married. Good, Rachel and Leah, right? And we have all kinds of stories about people getting married. Moshe married Zipporah, right? Everybody, we know that there is such a concept. Your parents, your parents? Oh yeah? Oh, very good. Okay, do you have a son, do you have a brother named Gershon?
No.
Okay. Right. So, right, all kinds of, right, we know people got married, but it never tells us how to get married, right? The oral Torah learns from one verse almost all the laws of how to get married, right? But it doesn't say it in the written Torah, right? Also, you ever see anybody wearing tefillin? Yeah? Good. Where do they wear them? Good. On their arm and on their head. What color are they? Black. And is ever see anybody with pink tefillin? Not yet. Someday somebody's going to say yes. God forbid. Right? But, right, they're black. Right? What shape are they? Square. You ever see round ones? No. Right? What's inside them? Certain parchments. Right? If you looked inside every set of tefillin in the whole world, hopefully, they all have exactly the same things inside them. And if you looked at them 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, or 500 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, they have exactly the same thing inside them. Right? So, where in the written Torah does it say you should wear tefillin? All it says in the written Torah is that men should wear something called totafot on their hand and between their eyes. That's all it says in the Torah. Now the word totafot, it turns out, is not even Hebrew. It's a contraction of 2 words from 2 different languages. Right? And nobody knew what that word meant. Right? And it doesn't say, it just says wear your hand on your hand and between your eyes. Right? What does it mean? So I should be wearing them here and here, right? But if you've ever seen somebody wearing tefillin, you've never seen anybody wear them there and there. And somehow everybody seems to know what totafot are and what color they are and where to put them and what's inside them, right? None of that is in the written Torah. That was all in the oral Torah, right? Now, by the way, there was a group of people, there were actually several groups of people, but the most recent one was a group called the Karaites. Anybody ever hear of the Karaites? Apparently there are a few wandering around somewhere still. But the Karaites were people who believed in the written Torah and they didn't believe in the oral Torah. Right? They said, listen, we can accept that there's a written Torah given by God, but we don't accept this oral Torah stuff. So they actually would wear their tefillin on their hand and between their eyes. Right? Now, I don't know how they knew what color it was. I don't know how they knew what to put inside it. I don't even know how they knew what tefillin was. I don't know how they knew who wears it and who doesn't. Right? I don't know how they knew that it's supposed to have straps on it. Right? Etc., etc. I don't know how they got married. I don't know how they did any of that, because without the oral law, none of this makes sense. But there were groups of people, the Karaites before them, the Sadducees, who tried to do this, and it didn't work. Right? Because Judaism without the oral law doesn't make any sense. Right? I often tell people, if you want to learn more about Judaism, there are a lot of great books I can recommend. But one book you should definitely not read to start learning about Judaism is the Torah. Right? At least not without commentaries. Right? Because if you take this book, right? And you start reading through it, you will find grammar mistakes, you will find things that don't seem to make sense, you will find things that aren't explained well enough, you will find things that seem to contradict other things it says in the Torah, right? So without the oral Torah, I don't know how to make heads or tails of the written Torah, right? I'll give you another example, right? Everybody knows that prayer is a very central part of Judaism, right? Doing it in synagogue or not in synagogue, whether you pray once a day or twice a day or 3 times a day, right? All of that is not in the Torah. It doesn't say anywhere in the written Torah that anybody should pray. It does say that we should do some kind of service with our heart. We have to serve Hashem with our heart. And the oral Torah explains that the way you serve Hashem with your heart is by praying. But if you just read through the written Torah, you'd say, okay, Jews don't pray. Because we don't have any time where it tells us that we should pray. We do find that people prayed, but we don't find that we're told to pray, right? Okay, more, right? On Shabbos. So if you've ever kept Shabbos or you've ever been to somebody's house who keeps Shabbos, you know that they have all kinds of rules about what you can and can't do on Shabbos, right? You can't turn on the lights, and if you want to separate out the peas and the carrots, there's a way you can do it and a way you can't do it, right? And if you're playing with one of the kids and you say, let's build a puzzle, he might say, we're not allowed to build a puzzle, or you can't do it like that, you can't move that thing, right? All these laws, right? You're all familiar with this, yeah? What does it say in the Torah about Shabbos? It says one thing, 2 things. It says, number 1, you can't start a fire. Number 2, you can't do something called malacha. Now, what does malacha mean?
Isn't it the commandments that you can't, that you're forbidden to do?
Yes.
It's like 36 of them.
Good, 39, right? Good, but all it says in the Torah is don't do malacha, right? Now, the word malacha, loosely translated, means work, right? So you're not allowed to work on Shabbos. Okay, so I don't go to work. Fine. By the way, sometimes I do go to work, right? Because if Neve is having a Shabbaton and it's in her if I would come and speak, right? Shir and I have spent Shabbos together, right? Right? So what does that mean? Am I violating Shabbos? It says don't work. I went to work, right? I'll tell you something else. If I want to pick up this table, let's say it was a really heavy table, and I want to carry it up and down all the steps at Neve on Shabbos, can I do that? Yes. But if I go over here and I go like, can I do that? No, right? So this word work obviously is much more complicated than the word work, right? And as Ariella said, there are 39 categories of it. Where does all that come from? Not one word about that in the written Torah. All it says is don't light a fire and don't do malacha, right? That's it. So everything we know about Shabbos is only because we have an oral Torah. And the last one that I listed here, there are many, many of these things we talk about. I'll tell you a few more. But it says in the Torah, ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye. What does that mean? What does it mean, an eye for an eye?
It could mean a lot of things.
Okay, well, what's the simple understanding?
Like if you do something to someone, then they should do it back to you.
Good, right? Specifically court, right? That if somebody is brought into court and we say he did something, we say, okay, well, if you did that to him, so we'll do the same thing to you, right? And there were systems, court systems that worked that way, right? So if somebody kills somebody, so let's say somebody knocks out somebody's eye, what should the punishment be? Well,
That's true. We would do the same thing.
good, we remove their eye, right? Okay, that's literally what the words an eye for an eye mean, right? Has there ever been a Jewish court in history that's done that? Ever? Do we have any record of thousands of years of Jewish history of any court ever taking out anybody's eye because they were accused of taking out somebody else's eye? No. Right? Do we take the Torah literally? We Jews? In general? Yes. We always take the Torah literally. Right? Except this verse. This verse is not meant to be taken literally. How do we know? It says it in the oral Torah.
Which verse?
The one, take an eye for an eye. Right? If it didn't say that in the oral Torah, we'd be taking people's eyes out. Right? If that's what the Torah said to do. Right? But every Jewish court in history has known that this verse is not meant to be taken literally, even though we take everything else that's in the written Torah literally. Right? How do we know that? From the oral Torah. Right? I'll tell you something else, very, very interesting. What does, anybody know a little bit of Hebrew? What word is that?
Chalav.
Good, chalav. Right? What word is that? Chalav. Okay, good. Right? Except if I tell you that this one is spelled like this, and this one is spelled like this. Right? Now, what word is this? Chelev. Right? Now, what is chalav? Milk. What is chelev? Chelev is a type of fat that's found around the kidneys in an animal, right? The Torah says, what does the Torah say about chalav? Can you drink chalav? Yes, but not with meat, right? Now, chelev, this fat that's found in an animal around the kidneys, is a very serious prohibition. You may not eat it, right? Kosher animals, we remove anything that might have chelev in it, right?
Is that fat?
It's a certain type of fat, not all the fat, but some of the fat, right? These forbidden types of fat. It says in the Torah. It says in the Torah we can't eat the chelev, right? We don't know the reason for that, right? Now, has anybody ever seen a Torah scroll? Yeah? What's interesting about this in a Torah scroll?
It doesn't have the vowels.
Good, it doesn't have the vowels. So all the Torah says is that this is completely forbidden, is completely permitted, just don't eat it with meat. And this is absolutely forbidden. Don't ever let us find you ingesting this, right? Now, I have no way of knowing which one's which, right? It could be that the Torah says, thou shalt not, by a very serious punishment, thou shalt not ever drink milk, right? And the forbidden fats around the kidneys, eat them. Just don't eat them with meat, right? One could very easily read the Torah that way, right? But the oral Torah tells us no, that the first one is chalav, which means milk, and the second one is chelev, which means forbidden fats. But without the oral Torah, that doesn't make any sense.
The oral Torah has vowels.
Yes, well, when it needs to, right? Meaning again, remember, the oral Torah is not written down. We'll get to the written down part. Today it's written down. But the oral Torah was not written down. It was explained, right? So therefore, Moshe would tell people, hey guys, this pasuk that says don't eat meat and chet lamed bet, it means don't eat meat and milk. And they would say, how do you know? And he would say, because Hashem told me, right? So, right, there was the written part, and then we'll talk about why it is this way, right? We'll also talk about why do we believe this, if state oral didn't mistakes happen all along the way, right? But first, what we want to point out is that it must be, if you believe in the written Torah, if you believe the written Torah is divine, you can't not believe in the oral Torah, right? Because the written Torah is unreadable without an oral Torah, right? It must be that that Hashem not only gave us the text, but explained the text to us, right? And that's what we understand the oral Torah to be. The oral Torah is Hashem's explanation that comes along with the written Torah.